Alrighty, so we have entered the last three major topics we're going to cover for this class. And the first is, and I like the way Andrew's done this, which is just handling how to deal with Mongo and, his new idea of the task app. But for you all, right, you're going to be using your concepts when it comes to creating the API, which is next. So the thing I want to say before I get into what you need to do this week is I want you to contextualize what we're doing. So we're going to be using MongoDB, a database system, an open source database system for handling our data operations, our CRUD operations that I so emphasized last time to try to get you used to these concepts of create, read, update, and delete. So where before we used the JSON file, we're going to make a major upgrade to using something that is more in line with what people are doing. And I really like how Andrew covers the different SQL versus no SQL. And in that case, it doesn't mean no, it means not only. And that's an important distinguishment. For years, when I just heard the term, I thought it meant, well, no SQL? No. And if you don't know SQL, you will need to take a class in database. And in that case, you'll learn SQL. So if you don't come in with any, it's not required. But for this case, it is just good to understand that there are many different databases that are out there and available to you. And this one is available to you free. There is even a web-based version of MongoDB. But in this case, we're going to install the whole thing. Not the whole thing, but all of the required parts. So part of this week is just getting everything set up. So as an example, on my, well, actually before I jump there, one of the things I did as he was walking through was I just saved the commands in a file called Mongo in my public directory. And I just saved them because in case I ever needed to, like if for some reason my up arrow didn't work. In addition, I did something by modifying my system. Now, these things are not required. I'm just telling you about it. And I modified something called the bash RC system. And the bash .rc. And that is just a file on all systems that you can. And in this case, like instead of running this whole command in the command line in order to run Mongo, I just can run mrun. Now for me to run the tool, the Robo T3, in order to graphically look at the database, I would normally run Mongo or Robo Mongo, but I modified that too. So what you're about to see me do is actually run my modified commands, but I wanted to give them to you, and because they are specific for each operating system in the sense of where it's put, he gives you recommendations, and this is where you're setting up on your local system where you're going to save the data that you're writing to the MongoDB database. The great thing here is it's going to feel very much like JSON in the way that it's organized. Because it really is underneath, but with a lot more infrastructure. But I won't go too far into that. The other thing is you can run these, right, and he does show this right in the terminal and just add terminals and have multiple terminals running. For my particular operating system, I decided to run them on the built-in terminal because it just made more sense for various reasons. So when I want to run Mongo, right? Again, that's my command, but that's what the output looks like, right? And then when I want to run Robo T3, what I would do then is open a new window. It's going to run here in a sec. And then I would run, again, not instead of the long command, but I think for all of you, except maybe Bradley, who's also using Linux, you actually will just have a standard app. But for me, I have to do that. Okay, and then we connect into the database, and there we have it. So I guess why I like this is doing it this way from the different the command terminal that's built into my OS, is that I don't have it clamoring up, I don't know, my terminal. Okay. So here's what you're going to do, right? So you're going to basically take what you did in the section, but I want you to recreate it for just your concept. And of course, I'll use email. And then in my collections, right? So there will be the emails that I built. Now, in this case, what you're doing, and I'm just showing you the output here. And I actually have the write-up. So let's go look at that real quick just to give you that context. And I give you the steps here, right, to remember, because these are important, right? Every time you set up a new folder, run npm init. Call that folder whatever you want, but don't call it just MongoDB. That won't work. I found that out. I called it mongo-email.practice. And part of the reason I said practice here is next week we're going to end up building one that is going to be like our API. And that will be the last folder. And I say put these out in this case, in the public repo. And then you're going to run npm install for MongoDB, right? He qualifies the version, I didn't. And then create a new file for your CRUD operations. So that's what you'll see when you look at my editor in a minute. And then deconstruct the Mongo client and the Mongo ID reference, which he showed that, set up the connection. And then here's probably where the bulk of the work comes in, right? Is consider your dev and write MongoDB commands, because he walks you through, right, the update. Well, actually, let's go look at them. Actually, wouldn't hurt, just as a reminder. So here's mine, right? So what I did is after I set up the command, and by the way, I want you to do this in the style that he's talking about, which is using promises versus callbacks, right? So I did insert many. That's how I handle it. And these are the field names, right? So first, this would be my collection, and we can go look at it in Robo T3. But the idea of my document, and then within there are the fields. But this is right. So I did update many. Insert. Not update. Insert would be the create. And then, by the way, the reason, because what you typically do is you create, because this makes sense, you have to create the data, then you can read the data. And I did find, and I use status to find, and like the equivalent of what he did with compare. And then I did an update, and then the last thing I did was a delete. So the update was many, and I said where I found status new, then I'm going to set that status to red. And then I did an update by ID, and then I passed in that, which is a little funky the first time you see this new object ID, but it's the equivalent of, for those of you that took my 93, it's a UUID on steroids, I'd say, because it works across multiple platforms, and it's very minimizing in the way that it's stored. And he walks you through that, which I think is great, showing you how to actually see what the string value versus the binary version of that. So that is really great information to have. But anyway, in this case, my last operation was delete one. Okay, so you can run these commands, comment them out, right, as you do them. So you want to do this for your particular, and you're going to name this whatever your concept is. And again, I'm helping you prep. So the thing I want to say before I start talking about how you have to submit this is that the one thing, and I understand why Andrew's doing this, is he's showing us how to do these operations within the native driver. Next week, we're going to switch to our next section, which is next week. We're going to switch to Mongoose, and Mongoose is going to have its own commands that we use for these operations. So it's not that different, but it is a little like you have to make a little switch in your head to saying, okay, now we've learned this, and now we're going to learn just a new way to do this, which, there's so much in this class given the short-term nature and the amount of content that we go over. So I just want to give you a little heads up on that. And so the other thing is, and I want you, and I'll talk about now, start moving into how I want you to submit this. So and I want to have at least 6 documents in your collection. And then in your reply, I want you to take a print screen. And this is the one thing, and I'll show you mine, right? It's just to show that you got how you're running MongoDB. And if you could do it on one, fine. If you can't do it on multiple, and then how you're running, how your setup is for Robo T3. And then I want you to also create a text file that shows the console output of your CRUD commands, and I'll show you my example in a minute. And then write about your experience of doing this week and let us know if you had any challenges or issues. Might have just been timing, because that's the other thing, and I will do this with you right now, is that because next Thursday, and I'm doing this a week ahead of time, so because that is Thanksgiving, right? So we're actually on campus holiday. What I always do is I move it to the following Monday. But what this means is it's going to hit right up against one of the most important sections we're going to do as far as the code ups, right? So I'm going to move that to there. So that's going to be due on the 2nd, and then on let's just go ahead and save that, and then we'll go look at the calendar. But before I go look at the calendar, let me just show you, because I actually did, and I'll do a reply so you can see this. But in my GitHub, I went ahead and pushed the files, both the text file and the image file out there, right? So here's my practice file. Here's my text output, right? So this is just the output showing the commands. It's just a way to document, right? Because really in this case, you could probably start thinking, well, we could have actually said on the result output, we could have just looked at particular, and he talked about this, different operations. It would have been fine, and you're welcome to do that. I just was going to do them all. So one thing you'll need to do is do that output file. That's one thing I'll look for. And then make sure you take your print screen, and he'll show you what mine looks like. Put it up in your IMJ. So in this case, I just did a print screen showing, boy, that, I'm not sure why, that image. Anyway, I'll embed it into the, reply, but anyway, it does show it all. Oh, it's also because the editor setting back there. Oh, there we go. That's why. And then here's my Robo T3. Just, do it again, one print screen or many. Okay. So, okay, so then under calendar, let's go look real quick, because, the next section that we're going to do, the most important section, because it is the thing that you're doing that is going to be the fundamental part of what you take into our last develop it, right? So in this case, 99, let me switch. That's my machine learning class. So, so you can see here, we're on here, boop, boop, and then, so we're talking about actually next week. No, that is right. That's right. See, where it normally would be on the 28th, right? I'm going to go ahead and move forward here. What you're going to have is you're going to have both the code up for section 11, which is, again, this is the section so important, plus the learn together. So if possible, here's what I'd recommend you do, but I'm not going to force it on you, is actually I would do this before you head out for vacation, right? Because there is a campus holiday, and I'll actually probably put attendance there as well as far as due. But most importantly is to understand that those things will fall on the same day because of the holiday. And then we're into our last learn together, right? Actually, no, we have this one. And then our develop it here, develop it one. Anyway, I'll be talking more about those later. I've been thinking about them in terms of how we're going to do that, because there's going to be several pieces of software that has to be set up. So anyway, we'll get there. So just to complete the thought process to, just so that you're clear, what you need to do is build your own concept, whatever your dev one was, out, just as far as setting up for your database operations for this week. And then, sorry, it's in here somewhere. There it is. There it is, week 7. Learn together. And then again, I've given you in the instructions for how to do that. And then in your reply, you'll give me a link to, you can give me a link to your code, give us a link to your text file, and you can embed your image in the reply. So it's easy for us to see your setup. We can go look at your code and then write something, right? And I'm going to put a word count here. So I actually want to say, to actually do at least 100 words about this, because it's just part of the process of a class like this is for you to have some type of writing that you're doing, which you may feel like you're writing all the time code, right? But it is just a part of, there we go. Okay. All right. So I hope that gives you good instruction for how to complete this work and the change of the due dates. And then please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.